So the Fed has just raised rates again. And my friends, if your heart is pounding, if you're feeling a little bit dizzy, if you're concerned, if you're out of breath, you better go find a park ranger right now, because these hikes, they're most likely not going to end. But before you think about going to the emergency room, understand this. Rates are still historically cheap. You can see all the way back to 1954 on this chart. However, if you're like me, if you're like a lot of people who have forgotten those old years, money is no longer cheap. The cheap days of money are over. The Fed has raised rates 3 times in 2022, and you got to be willing to bet that they're probably going to raise it at least once, if not twice more. And this has a huge impact on businesses, especially businesses that thought they could keep on using other people's money in order to grow, in order to finance their expeditions, in order to make money for themselves. And you might be wondering, well, how do those two interact with each other? Well, let me break it down simply for you. It's a basic math kind of procedure. There's a lot of things that can go into rates and investments and ROI, but this in general is the correlation between what you're going to pay on a note, why you should care about the Fed rate, and how this is all done. The way it's primarily looked at is what's called the capital asset pricing model. What this basically means is that there's a risk-free rate of return, which is traditionally pegged to the U.S. 10-year Treasury note. Why? Because the U.S. has never defaulted on a loan. We've always paid our debts. So knock on wood, we keep on doing that. And then there's a risk premium. Now that risk premium is based on multiple different factors, right? It can be based on industry factors, right? If I invest in something that is high risk versus if I invest in something that is low risk, well, my risk premium is going to be different. And that's where I get into my required ROI. So when a Fed rate goes up, this inherently is going to have an impact on what you can loan money out on, which is inherently going to have an impact on what that required ROI is going to be. But you might be thinking to yourself, well, what's the mix between a Fed rate and a Treasury rate? Well, you can see in this chart right here, and I do apologize because one chart goes all the way back to 1980. The other one only goes back to 1954. The top chart is the one you saw, which was previously the Fed rates from 1954. The bottom one is the Treasury rates. This is a U.S. 10-year Treasury note rate. And you can see that correlation in that chart between 1980 and the top of the chart, in which the Fed rates skyrocketed. And what's important for us to take a note back and think about is that the 10-year Treasury rates are up by 175% from the same time a year ago. Now, rates, once again, are still historically cheap, right? The notes are still historically cheap. We're not talking about that 15, 20% that we saw previously, but that doesn't help if we've been living and operating and doing business in a world in which money has been cheap. So you might be thinking, well, what's that risk-free rate of return and why does a Treasury note matter? Well, like I said before, the risk-free rate of return is traditionally tied to the 10-year U.S. Treasury note, right? Some people will do it differently. You can look at different other risk-free rates of return, but the way to think about a risk-free rate of return is very simple. If I gave the U.S. government $1, they're going to pay that dollar back with interest. It's almost guaranteed, right? That's a 99.99% chance that the government's going to pay me back with interest. That's why it's so important that the U.S. doesn't default on any of its loans. You put that in, plus you put in the risk premium, and there you get the required ROI. But you're probably thinking to yourself, Josh, I don't really care about this math. I don't care about the reasons. What does it actually mean for me as a business leader? How am I supposed to react to this? Well, first and foremost, right, if you're a business that relies on capital injections, your model has to change. Sure, the rates have gone up 3 times this year, 0.75 basis points every single time it's gone up. You got to assume we'll probably do it again at least once, if not more. That's going to continue to push up the amount that you have to take a loan out at. That's going to hurt your business. It's also for anybody who's considering investors. Now that investment has to look at something different, right? When you start raising that risk-free rate of return, well, that investment starts having to come higher and higher. It's that risk reward, right? My risk premium is that amount that I need to make over top of what the guaranteed rate is, the risk-free rate. So for anybody who's looking for investors, think about that, because now that is a big competition you're competing with. Second part is if you have to change your model over, or if you're one of these cash flow operation businesses that there's always that kind of lag, right? You always have that carry at the end of the day between when you invoice, when you pay your people, and when you receive your cash from the business. You might want to consider about taking a loan, maybe a little bit of a capital injection, because most likely today's rates are going to probably be some of the better rates that we're going to see for a very long time. Maybe not, but I would probably not want to risk everything on it. The last part is if you are in one of these companies or you are running a company that is looking at different opportunities, you really want to focus on those cash flow opportunities that are going to cash flow sooner, other than maybe that will come later. This is really comes down to what is going to be your own ROI on what you are bringing about and bringing forward, right? The more money you have to take, the more money you have to float, the less money you're going to take. So you might want to stack these opportunities one on top of the other. Now, before you go running from the hills, close down your business, don't start a business, just remember this is one of my favorite business kind of memes. Someone was like, you know what? This country needs a delicious steak sauce in the Civil War, right? Established 1862, A1 steak sauce. So if somebody could create a steak sauce that is still here today, imagine what you could do. And the last two quotes, right? Always the quotes you got to have. Put them on your wall. Put them somewhere. Warren Buffett, be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. Nathan Rothschild, the time to buy is when there is blood in the streets. And guys, both of those apply today. So don't be stupid, but also don't let fear rule you and rule your business. As always, I love the game. I love entrepreneurs. I love business owners. If you got any questions, feel free to DM me here. If you want to reach out to me. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I wish you nothing but the best success. Keep on rising. Keep on hustling. See you guys later.